the sound of music, with songs they have sung for 1,000 years.
When The Sound of Music opened in 1965, nobody could predict it would save a dying studio. Behind Julie Andrews' radiant smile lay a film born from desperation, held together by secrets the world never saw. A helicopter that became a weapon. A director's vision that nearly broke its star. And songs written by a dying man, already saying his final goodbye. For 60 years, the world has sung along to those Alpine melodies, never knowing the painful shadows that fell across those sunlit Austrian hills now. Fact number 10. The violent truth behind those 25 seconds that opened the film. You remember that moment? Julie Andrews spinning in an Alpine meadow, arms outstretched. The camera sweeping down from heaven itself. 25 seconds of pure magic. What the world never saw was the actress lying face down in the grass, spitting dirt and hay, knocked flat by a jet helicopter's downdraft. The cameraman hung from the open door, leaning out with his camera to avoid the helicopter's shadow. Andrews stood at one end of the field. The helicopter approached from the other. A man with a megaphone, hidden in the bushes, yelled the signal. They moved toward each other. And every time the helicopter circled back to reset, the downdraft flattened her into the mud. Take after take, she stayed standing for only a handful. Andrews kept asking for a wider circle, her voice barely cutting through the engine roar. Finally, covered in dirt, she'd had enough. The hills were alive, barely. Fact number 9. The humiliating secret Christopher Plummer carried about his own performance. Christopher Plummer recorded every song on set. He had rehearsed for weeks and poured emotion into something good and edelweiss. But when the film was released, Captain Von Trapp's singing voice wasn't his. The studio had replaced his vocals with singer Bill Lee. Producers decided his voice lacked the polished sound they wanted. So they hired Lee, a veteran ghost singer, who had performed in ensemble roles for Disney films like Peter Pan and Lady and the Tramp. Only song entrances and exits remained Plummer's real voice. The rest belonged to a stranger. Plummer never hid his bitterness, later calling the film The Sound of Mucus. His original recordings sat in a vault for 58 years. They weren't released until 2023, long after he had passed. The world finally heard the voice he wanted them to hear all along. Fact number 8. The painful secret hidden inside the most romantic scene in the film. Everyone remembers that gazebo. Liesl twirling in the rain, leaping across benches, singing 16, going on 17 with effortless grace. The scene was filmed last. On the first take, Charmian Carr jumped onto a smooth wooden bench. The wardrobe department had forgotten to put rubber soles on her shoes. Her foot slipped. She went straight through the glass window and crashed onto the soundstage floor. Minor cuts. A sprained ankle. The studio doctor rushed over with bandages and what he called a vitamin B12 shot. It was not vitamins. It was pain medication strong enough to let her finish dancing. For 3 days, Carr felt nothing. She danced through that gazebo scene. In absolute agony, she couldn't feel. If you watch closely, her right ankle is visibly thicker than the left, the bandage hidden beneath makeup and stockings. Every graceful leap was filmed through medicated numbness. Romance built on broken glass. Fact number 7. The desperate financial gamble that almost never happened. In 1963, 20th Century Fox stood on the edge of collapse. Cleopatra had drained $44 million from studio coffers, forcing executives to sell stock and liquidate their legendary backlot. Just to survive. Chairman Spiroskouras was fired before the film even premiered. The studio was dying. Then Richard Zanuck made a decision that seemed insane. He greenlit an $8 million musical about singing nuns and Nazis, when Fox could barely pay its bills. Investors called him reckless. Board members wanted safer bets. But Zanuck believed in a governess named Maria and 7 singing children. The gamble paid off beyond imagination. The Sound of Music became the highest-grossing film of all time, surpassing Gone with the Wind's decades-long reign. It saved the studio. Without it, there would be no Star Wars, no Avatar, and no modern Fox. One musical about courage became the studio's own final act of survival. Fact number 6, the heartbreaking truth behind the song everyone thought was Austrians. Millions believed Edelweiss was an ancient Austrian folk song, passed down through generations. Tourists still ask for it in Vienna cafes. Even Austrians swore they had known it since childhood. Sung by their grandparents. The truth was far more American. Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein wrote it during the Boston tryouts in 1959. When they realized Captain Von Trapp needed one more song, Hammerstein crafted those lyrics in Boston. He was already dying. Stomach cancer was eating through him, though few people knew. The words came slowly. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, bless my homeland forever.
Edelweiss, Edelweiss, bless my homeland forever.
Forever was the last word he ever wrote as a lyricist. 9 months after the show opened on Broadway, Hammerstein was gone. The song that felt older than memory itself was actually a dying man's final goodbye. Not to Austria, to everything, and the world sang it back, never knowing they held his last breath. Fact number 5. The terrifying moment a 5-year-old nearly drowned because no one thought to ask. They called it the do-re-mi scene. Children laughing in a rowboat. Maria standing with little Gretel. The boat rocks. They all fall into the lake. Simple, except for one detail the assistant director mentioned to Julie Andrews moments before the cameras rolled. The little one can't swim. Kim Carruth was 5 years old. The plan was for Andrews to catch her when the boat tipped, but when it happened, Andrews fell backward instead of forward. She swam as fast as she could. Crew members dove from the shore. Carruth went under at least twice, swallowing water with each gasp. It was Heather Menzies playing Louisa who finally pulled her out. Carruth threw up all over her. The terror was real. For 60 years, audiences watched that scene and smiled at children splashing in water. They never knew a 5-year-old almost died because someone forgot to ask a simple question. Can you swim? The lake remembered what the film forgot. Fact number 4. The city where they filmed refused to watch its own story. Salzburg, Mozart's birthplace, a city built on music and mountains and memory. When Hollywood arrived in 1964, the locals made one demand clear. No swastikas, no Nazi flags draped from their buildings, no actors in German uniforms crossing their squares. The war had ended just 19 years before. The wounds were fresh. Robert Wise, the director, gave them an ultimatum. If you won't let us film it, we'll use the real thing. Actual footage from 1938. Austrian crowds cheering for Hitler. Faces still recognizable, still living. The city relented. They hung the flags, allowed the uniforms. But when the film premiered in 1965, Salzburg theaters showed it for exactly 3 days before pulling it from screens. Local audiences stayed away. Critics called it inauthentic, a sugared American fantasy that replaced their folk songs with Broadway tunes and dressed their history in Hollywood costumes. The rest of the world fell in love with those Alpine meadows. Salzburg turned its back. The hills were alive with the sound of music. The city remained silent. Fact number 3. The girl who sang about tasting her first champagne was doing exactly that. Charmian Carr was 21, playing 16. She had never been away from home, never stayed in a hotel without her mother, never tasted champagne. Then came Salzburg. Spring of 1964, the director moved her out of the hotel with the children and into the Bristol with the adults. With Christopher Plummer. He was 34, handsome, worldly. He knew every bar in Salzburg. Carr wrote about those nights years later, how Plummer taught her to drink, how she stayed out until dawn, even with 5 a.m. calls the next morning, how she finally understood what Liesl sang in that song. I'd like to stay and taste my first champagne. It wasn't acting anymore. During filming, she fell through a glass window in the gazebo, hurt her ankle badly, got pain medication to keep dancing. But the champagne, that was real. The late nights, real. The first taste of adult freedom far from home, all of it real. Years later, she said Plummer was the person who taught her how to drink. She smiled when she said it. The memory was fond. Fact number 2. The voice that conquered mountains lost everything to a knife that never should have touched her. 32 years after The Sound of Music made her voice immortal. Julie Andrews walked into Mount Sinai Hospital for what her doctor called routine. A small lesion on her vocal cords. Simple surgery. No risk. He promised she would sing again in weeks. It was June 1997. She was starring in Victor Victoria on Broadway. Her husband and producers wanted her to tour. Surgery seemed faster than rest. She trusted him. When she woke up, her singing voice was gone. The surgeon had operated on both sides of her vocal cords when there was no reason to operate at all. Scar tissue replaced what used to vibrate and soar. Her 4-octave range collapsed to barely 1. She filed a lawsuit in 1999. Singing has been a cherished gift. Her statement read, "My inability to sing has been a devastating blow." The case settled quietly the following year. Another doctor tried to help, removed scar tissue, stretched what remained. But most of her vocal cords were simply gone. Destroyed. The hills were alive. Her voice was not. Fact number 1. The woman whose life became the most beloved film in history was told there was no room for her at her own premiere. Maria von Trapp sat in Vermont on March 2nd, 1965. While Hollywood celebrated her story without her, she had written to the studio weeks before a simple request. Could she attend the premiere of The Sound of Music, the film based on her memoir, her life, her escape? The producers wrote back. No seats available. The theater was full. They needed every seat for celebrities who would bring cameras and headlines. Maria understood she was not famous enough, not glamorous enough. She had sold her story rights years before for $9,000. Hollywood bought it secondhand. She received royalties eventually, about $500,000, but no invitation. She had appeared in the film itself during I Have Confidence, walking past an archway with her daughter Rosemarie. A brief moment, but on premiere night, even shadows had no place. The film saved a dying studio, made history, won 5 Academy Awards. Maria von Trapp watched none of it. Her story conquered the world. The world forgot to save her a seat. This closes the countdown powerfully and emotionally, giving a perfect ending to your narration series.